Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's BDF44 coming at you with another video. So, of course, it's a very important day because tomorrow's NBA draft, and there's a lot of trades taking place to try to make sure that draft picks are traded before they're actually drafted. Because once they do, they lose value. Most people know that the option of being able to pick what you want is what you're paying for when you get a pick, rather than after the pick being made, it being a specific player, and now you just take whatever the limitations of that player is. So, with that being said, it may be a lot to talk about, and I work later on today, so I may not be able to touch on everything. But one of the things that's on my mind right now is what the Houston front office, the situation the Houston front office is in right now. It's really tricky for them because they have a situation where they have given up all of their picks to acquire Russell Westbrook, and they're probably in for a rebuild. They probably can't get rid of Russell Westbrook for a bunch of picks because no GM in their right mind is going to do that. And James Harden wants to go to the Nets, who doesn't really have a lot of picks, but they do have some talent that you would want. So the Houston Rockets probably need to get creative in any type of trade that takes place with the Nets, because although the Nets have plenty of assets that you can take back to make the trade acceptable, what they don't have is picks, which is what you need if you're rebuilding. I don't think that in a Western Conference, Spencer Dinwiddie, Caris LeVert, Russell Westbrook, if he has to stay, Jared Allen, that's a nice team. In the Eastern Conference, that's a playoff team. In the Western Conference, you're just in the mix at best. And they've gotten rid of Covington now. They didn't bring back anything substantial for Covington because, they brought back Ariza, who, his family to LA. But he's at this stage in his career, he's probably just going to give you minimal, vet production at best. You're not getting what Covington brought you. You're not getting the old Trevor Ariza you had in his 2 stints with Houston. This is now his 3rd. So it's like, what do we do to facilitate our rebuild and still get James Harden what he wants? Because it looks like they feel pressured to do so. Now, he's on a contract for another several years. So if they decide not to trade him, they can just keep him disgruntled and ain't really much he could do about it. The leverage is not his, but because he's such a big star and because they are making moves that have basically deteriorated the landscape around him, or rather the team around him and the infrastructure that he's used to, you have to also think about what messages you're sending to the future people who may want to come to your team. And they've had a good reputation. They don't have problems getting stars. Houston has always kept a star or two on their team. So you don't want to send a message that you're not willing to accompany a free agent or a superstar when you make decisions that collapse the team around him. So it's a reputation situation that I think they may be faced with that may force them to do right by James Harden. And James Harden wants to go somewhere that just can't facilitate their rebuild. So, there's ways around that, but they have to figure that out, and they have a new GM. Daryl Morey's not there anymore. So it's like, okay, what is this GM's going to do? Now, he traded away Covington for Trevor Ariza on a salary dump. That's to be determined if that makes any sense or not, because really you're just freeing up cap. And Covington was a player that probably could have got you a pick. But if you're valuing cap space, which they should if they can't get rid of Russell Westbrook and James Harden contract, then they probably made the right move. But whatever they bring in has to be better than Covington. And quite honestly, I don't know what or who that would be. So it's a little tricky. They don't have an identity. They're in the midst of trying to trade away 2 Hall of Fame players, and they don't have any picks. So it's like, and they have a rookie coach and a rookie GM. So all of this looks bad. And I just don't know how they're going to get what they need unless a third team is involved, or they just make the trade with the Nets and then turn around and flip what they receive from the Nets to places they can get picks from. That's what makes sense. But can you get all that done in one day? Probably not. So that means your picks are probably going to be future first rounders from years in the future. So their situation is just a conundrum if they're able to pull it off. Maybe you start making calls to places like Boston and OKC, who have a plethora of picks. Maybe you try to dangle what you receive from the Brooklyn Nets to those teams and see if you could try to make that work somehow. But if you're the Houston Rockets, you must find a way to get not only cap space, which you will receive if you're able to unload those contracts in theory, if you're not taking back massive salary dumps to get, I mean, that would make no sense. But in theory, you should be able to free up cap space once one of those two superstars are off the books. Then it's just about what you fill them in with. And nobody's going to want to come to Houston right now without an identity. So it's the draft. Your move is the draft, Houston. And quite honestly, I think they should look elsewhere for a deal. Now, I know that last night I made a video saying that Brooklyn needs to make the deal, even though it doesn't really benefit them this season. But if you're Houston, on your end, it's like, I don't know that you really are inclined to make a deal with the Brooklyn Nets unless they find a way to get a bunch of picks for you. And that's another thing. If I'm looking at the Nets, and I'm Houston, I'm saying, I don't want to have to take what you give me to get what I want if I'm giving you what you want. You go get what I need and then give it to me, and I give you James Harden. And that's really what it comes down to if I'm the Houston brass. It's like, nah, I'm not inclined to do anything for you at all. You're taking my best player. He wants to be with you. You go get what I need. You don't have it, go get it. So if I'm reading the tea leaves and all of that is possible, all of that's true, the Brooklyn Nets may be looking to trade Spencer Dinwiddie, maybe looking to trade Caris LeVert, maybe looking to trade DeAndre Jordan or somebody they can to acquire the picks necessary to make it make sense for that trade. That's what needs to happen now, because as much as I like the package that the Nets have, and I like their what they can offer, that doesn't help the Rockets enough to make them a contender. That doesn't help them enough to facilitate their rebuild. It's not in the Western Conference. It just makes them average. Not even average, a little below average, to be honest. So, yeah, picks is what they want. To get bad quickly and have the first pick in the draft next year and the year following is what they want. They want to be in a position like OKC with a bunch of picks and a lot of cap space. That's what the Rockets need to have going on. That's what the Knicks need to have going on. That's what a lot of teams in the league want. But it's just trying to make that happen is very difficult. But with what they have, they should be able to do it. James Harden, look, if Drew Holiday got you 3 picks, 2 of them being swaps, James Harden should be able to get you 6 picks, 3 of them being swaps. Like whatever Harden's worth, whatever Holiday's worth, Harden should be double that, in my opinion. And I got a lot of respect for Drew Holiday, but that's just what cachet and a bunch of hardware will do for you. You know, personal accolade hardware, which is MVP, All-Stars, etc. You know, that gets you this, what I'm talking about. And that's ultimately what it is. His price tag should be sky high. They were going to pay him $50 million a year. No soul has ever made $50 million a year. And the Rockets were attempting to give him that yesterday. That was going to be the world record for the most ever anyone has ever made in the season. So, NBA record, excuse me. So what we're talking about is them now turning around, taking a player that they value that much, and trading him for maybe a fourth of that value without it being what they actually need. So now, you know, that's where I see this being. That's basically how I see the landscape of this, the framework of this circumstance here. They need, Houston should not just be happy with a good package. They should take back a haul of catastrophic proportions, especially if Harden says he wants to be in Brooklyn and only Brooklyn. Some would say that the leverage now goes to Brooklyn because they are the only ones that anyone would be willing to, that anyone that Houston would be able to work with. They're the only team that Houston would be able to work with, but that is not necessarily the case. Because they're the only team James Harden wants to go to, Brooklyn should now be the ones on the clock to try to facilitate such a trade so that they can get him. So I suddenly see the leverage situation invertedly, completely opposite as it pertains to this particular situation. And it's really tricky because both teams, I'd imagine, are using that mindset to try to get the most out of this situation. You know, with the Nets being not probably wanting to play more than they've offered, and the Rockets probably wanting a whole lot of picks. So does this deal get done? I still think it does, but it's probably going to be a 3-team or 4-team massive haul with a bunch of salary dumps going back and forth, bunch of picks coming in from different angles. This is going to be a massive, massive deal. because what the Rockets need, the Nets just simply do not have right now. They just don't have it. And it took a whole night of thinking about that for me to realize it. Because I'm like, yo, I'd love to have Spencer Dinwiddie and all those guys, Jared Allen. That is a nice haul. But is it enough in the West? Especially if you're not able to let go of Harden. Now you're trying to make him happy? Is him being on the old Nets team essentially enough? Not even close. Not in the West. Maybe in the East when you get to play the Knicks and the Hornets every night, but with us out here, nah. You're not even making playoffs with that. So that's pretty much what I got to say, everybody. That's where I wanted to go with this. I just wanted to kind of get that off my mind and say, yo, the Houston's in a really tough spot, but they should not fold. I know they're asking for Kyrie Irving. That's not what they need. They need picks. They need picks. If they're asking for Kyrie Irving, they don't know what they need. That's the conclusion I've come to. They don't realize what they need. So that's really what I have to say about that. He's not going to be a good player to try to facilitate a rebuild. You put him in a bad situation, he's going to be unhappy. He's going to want to leave, and he's going to make the locker room a very difficult place to be in when you're losing. It just is what it is. I want to say kudos. I've also given some thought to some other things. The Milwaukee Bucks front office, I want to give them credit because they did the best they could. They were staring down the barrel of David Griffin, who understood the desperation of their situation and exploited it. And they didn't have a choice because they didn't have a whole lot of options. If Joel Embiid and Karl Towns and Ayton and all these different players were on the trade block and they did this stupid decision, giving up 3 picks, 2 swaps for him, I think you look at the Milwaukee and say, yo, what are you doing? If Kawhi Leonard or somebody became a trade option for them and they did this stupid crap, then you're like, okay. But under their circumstances, they did what they had to do, and unfortunately they were looking down the barrel of somebody who is notorious for fleecing people, notorious for being able to land deals that favor him heavily. He just understands what your situation is well, and he knows what the price tag to toss on some stuff because he knows what you're going to do out of desperation. And that's what Milwaukee had to do. They're in a tiny market. Nobody's coming there. Their best player that they've had for over 8 years trying to cultivate this guy is finally a free agent, and he's looking around saying you ain't did enough. Get me something. He probably had Drew Holiday as one of the players on his list. Drew Holiday was the most realistic option in their mind. They thought they could probably get him for a good price. They got on the phone with David Griffin, and David Griffin was like, nah, I've been where you're at. I know what you need to do here. Give me everything. And that's exactly what happened there. And you can't be mad at Milwaukee for doing what they had to do within the confines of what they could control. Now, does a great GM find a way to do something that's greater than what they pulled off? Yeah, hell yeah. Do I think Rob Pelinka finds himself in this situation if he has the Milwaukee Bucks? Not from what I've seen. But then again, Rob Pelinka has the luxury of Los Angeles and the Laker organization behind him in trying to make those moves. Milwaukee probably does a lot more with that if they had such a thing, but they do not. They don't have any of that. They got the town of Milwaukee, and they got Giannis talking about, I'm about to get up out of here. And nobody knocking on their door saying, can I come play with this guy? They had to get rid of Drew Bledsoe. Eric Bledsoe, everybody does that. I'm not the only one who's done that. But Eric Bledsoe, they had to get rid of because he's making too much money for his production at this stage. They've had him too long. He's not what they need at this point. They needed to get up out of that. George Hill's nice, but he was more salary than they needed at this time. That was good letting him go. And I think the picks, that the price on those picks were inflated because of the fact that Hill and Bledsoe needed to be absorbed in that trade. I just want to put that out there as well. I understand that trade was expensive as it was because the New Orleans Pelicans were taking back salary that probably wasn't ideal for their situation. So it's like, yo, I'm not taking Eric Bledsoe and Hill and just like a pick, and you think you're going to get one of my best players. Nah. If I'm taking back that crap that you're giving me, you best believe you're going to toss on some options on them picks or some swaps on those picks. So that's why the value of those picks were as high as they were. It wasn't just about Drew Holiday. It was about the salary take back. So I understand that, and I want to amend that as well. But at the end of the day, Milwaukee did pay a hefty price. And the bottom line was they did so because David Griffin was on the line and he wasn't playing with them. So kudos to the Milwaukee Bucks for doing the best they could. Do I think it keeps Giannis not alone? But I also like the moves they've done around that. They made a trade with Sacramento. They got DiVincenzo out of there. They got Ilyasova out of there. A few other guys I think went on in that trade as well, and they brought back Bogdanovic, one of the better young shooters in this league from Sacramento. They brought back another young player from Sacramento. I think someone they probably just drafted. And I hear that somehow they got Harrison Barnes as well, though I haven't seen anything official on that. I did hear that Harrison Barnes is headed to Milwaukee for whatever that's worth. So if indeed that is the truth, they did all of those things. If they did all of that and brought in Drew Holiday, I think the team that they're putting together for next season could be really good. They ain't gonna be Brooklyn good. They may not even be Miami good, but they'll give those teams a run for their money if they keep building in this direction this year. So maybe they make a move to swing for Serge Ibaka. I don't know what kind of money they got for that after doing what they just did, but they have gotten rid of some salary in theory. I have to look at their books to know exactly what happened, what Drew Holiday does to that, but they've done a lot to get rid of some dead weight that they had last year that they don't want. I think the only thing that I would say about this situation is DiVincenzo is better than they just traded him for. He's better than that. But for what they needed, this was a good move. But I do think Sacramento's going to love DiVincenzo. So that's what I got to say, man. Milwaukee's trying. They're trying. Give them credit. If they had a bigger market, they would have a better circumstance. They're doing the best they can. They get a lot of respect here. So that's what I had to say. Shout out to everybody who's trying to put their teams together, all the GMs out there who are doing their thing. I like watching what it is you guys do, and I know you guys are spending countless hours not sleeping, trying to put together these squads and keep these owners and fans happy. So shout out to everybody who does the hard work, and shout out to the players, of course, for giving us great memories and things that we can celebrate. So yeah, that's what I got. My name is BDF44. I'm out.